Greetings, everyone. Thank you for joining us. We will be starting the webinar in next 1 minute, and I really would like you all a thanks from my side to join us. I can see Professor Paul is also there. Back in team, if you can just give him a co-host, right?
If provided.
Okay.
Excellent. Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yes, Prof. I can see Sakile is there, Dr. Chiluba is there, and we are still waiting for Mr. Messe. He will be joining shortly. Yeah, he's there. So I would request back in team to please make him co-host also, so he can unmute himself. So now I'm just putting this. Prof, if you have anything, you can say.
Yeah. Thank you very much. Welcome, everybody. Can we request you all to put your videos on for a minute, and we can stop sharing the screen for a bit, let everybody join in. Is somebody doing that?
Prof, I can see Sakile and Dr. Chiluba. They both have turned off.
Maybe it's let me set it up so that I can because I can only see you. Let me change my view. I can't change my view for some very strange reason. Oh, here we go. Ah, yes. Okay, I think this is better. Okay, hello Sakile, hello Chiluba. May I request all the participants to share your video. If your bandwidth is good enough, would be great to see you all. Thank you. And while we wait a minute to get started, can I request you all also to just type in the chat box your name, organization, and country. Name, organization, and country. So that everybody else who's on the call gets to see others here as well. Wonderful. You can see almost 20 videos coming on. That's wonderful. Good. I can see all the chats coming in as well. All right, keep it going. Everyone will this way stay engaged and get to know each other. Sonia, please let us know when we have all the speakers in place.
We have all the speakers, Prof.
Okay, excellent. So then with that, and we're exactly on time, and we have approximately how many people who've joined?
It's 95 and it's keep increasing.
All right, we'll wait for the century. Okay, all right, with that, Sonia, I give you the floor. Why don't you kick off the presentation, and then we'll take it there. We have 90 minutes, and we'd like to make sure everybody's on time when they leave. I'm sure you have other responsibilities. Thank you.
Thank you, Prof. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. So as you can see on the screen, the webinar is on strengthening pharmaceutical manufacturing workforce capacity in Ethiopia and Africa, showcasing global innovation. This session will be for 90 minutes. And you can see we have 4 speakers today, Professor Paul, Ms. Sakile, Mr. Messe, and Dr. Chiluba. So we will be just going to next slide. Now there are few housekeeping announcements for participants. Please mute your mic and turn off your cameras. Please ask question using the chat box, because we will be having a Q&A session at the end of this once all the presentation will be completed. So you can put your questions on the chat box and those will be answered by the speakers. Please participate in the poll. We will be having 2 polls in the session. So I would request all of you to please participate. So we will be having a brief idea about yourself. The webinar recording will be available on Empower School of Health YouTube channel, and the slide deck will be shared with all. And also for all the attendees, there will be a link that will be posted on the chat box for downloading your certificate. So I would request all to please fill up the form. So the certificate will be sent to your registered email ID. There are few housekeeping announcements for speakers. Please turn on your cameras for better engagement. Please mute your microphone when other speaker is speaking. Please adhere to the webinar schedule timing. Now I am glad to announce and welcome Professor Paul Lalwani, first speaker, founder and executive director, Empower School of Health, the Center for Supply Chain Management and Center for Leadership Development. As you can see on his brief information, this is just a brief introduction about himself. He has over 25 years of experience in capacity building, procurement, and supply chain. He has been a former head of Global Fund Department of Procurement and Supply Chain Management, advisor to Gates Foundation, World Bank, WHO. Now I would request Professor Paul, please take it from here. Thank you.
Thank you very much. What I would also like to request the admin team, whoever is the speaker, put a spotlight on them so everyone would be able to see them as well. Okay. All right. So the agenda for today, the way we've structured this is I'll just have a few opening remarks and I'll set the objectives. And then we'll go to Dr. Chiluba, who will give us the overall Pan-African environment. Here, Dr. Chiluba is from the Africa CDC, and I'll introduce him properly later on. From the Pan-Continental, we'll move specifically to the Ethiopian context, and we'll hear from Mr. Messe, Wolde Mariam, and again, I'll introduce him more in depth later on. Moving from there, we give specific example of an innovative approach, that SADC region. In Southern Africa, we go to a regional approach where Ms. Akile Dube will be speaking. I will then come in and talk about some innovative pharmaceutical manufacturing capacity building strategies and approaches, building on the previous speakers. Then we'll have time for Q&A and there'll be another poll. So that's the overall flow, 90 minutes. Next slide. So the objectives: understand Africa's vision for pharmaceutical and vaccine manufacturing. That'll be set by Africa CDC. Gain a better understanding of Ethiopia's pharmaceutical capacity and needs. Introduce innovative strategies for accelerating regulatory approvals. That's the regional approach. And then I'll showcase some innovative approaches and a industrial tour to India that we are organizing for potential participants as well. Next, please. Now, I love this part. It's the background to understand who's here, who's there, and what your background is so that everybody knows. And we'll share this back with you immediately. This will take about 2 minutes for everyone. So please answer the questions, gender, age, which geography you're from. We have 114 participants. I think we'll get to most of them pretty quickly. I see some answers coming in. Wonderful. That's 1 minute and about 40 participants so far. That's good. Right, we've crossed 50% of participants. 30 seconds to go. 60+%, 15 seconds to go. Let's hit 70%. All right, everybody, 6 more percent to go. So in the meantime, let me give you some pre-results. About 60% male, 40% female. Age, the major ones, less than 30, 30 to 40, and 40 to 50. But 30 to 40 is almost 50%. Geographical region, almost between Africa and Ethiopia. So Ethiopian, 25%, which makes sense because this is being co-led by Africa CDC and the Ethiopian Pharmaceutical Manufacturers Association as well. So that's already almost 70, 80%. We have mostly others from Asia, a little bit of America and other. People's backgrounds, many pharmacy, diploma bachelor's, pharmacy master's, public health, some engineering and logistics. Years of experience, mostly less than 5, but also 6 to 10. And you heard about us through both the Empower and the EPA email. Wonderful. All right. Thank you very much. We can continue. So let me introduce Dr. Chiluba Mwela. It gives me great pleasure to do so. He's a European Commission Technical Advisor for the Africa CDC. And for those who aren't familiar, the role of Africa CDC in pharmaceutical manufacturing, it'll be clear very soon. He's a senior lecturer and researcher from the University of Zambia. By the way, University of Zambia is one of our partner organizations. Dr. Mwela has a PhD in pharmaceutics and is a senior lecturer at the University of Zimbabwe. Over 10 years of experience working in higher education as a pharmacy personnel trainer. International experience on policy, needs-based pharmacy education. He's a member of IFP or FIP, the International Federation of Pharmacists. Again, it's one of Empower's partners. And significantly, he is the European Commission Technical Advisor to the Secretariat, which is a really important role for the PAVM, the Partnership for African Vaccine Manufacturing. You'll hear a lot more about that, which is at this Africa CDC. With that, Dr. Mwela, I give you the floor. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Prof, for that introduction, and greetings to everyone who has joined this session today as we talk about local pharmaceutical and vaccine manufacturing on the continent. I will give a perspective mostly on the vaccine manufacturing, which is what we are focused on at the moment as PAVM, which is Partnership for African Vaccine Manufacturing. And just to mention that the focus here is to attend to one of the enablers of vaccine manufacturing on the continent, which is the workforce development. PAVM in itself has got a number of programs in itself, but I'll focus a lot more on talent development. Next slide, please. So we have seen that after the COVID pandemic, the need for Africa to become independent in as far as health commodity security is concerned has become apparent. So based on that, there is an ambition for Africa to begin to manufacture vaccines on the continent. And the target is to make sure that by 2040, 60% of the vaccines that the continent will be using will be manufactured right here in Africa. To do that, we need to have a skilled workforce to undertake that agenda. And we see that currently we have about 2,000 to 3,000 vaccine manufacturing full-time employees spread across the continent. But to achieve the target that we have set, we need to have at least between 9,000 to 14,000 full-time employees by the year 2040. So we see that this is a big challenge, and on top of that, we will need to counter three main challenges that talent development faces on the continent. I'll briefly talk about these as we go on. Next slide, please. Let's go again, next slide, and talk about the vision for public health in Africa, which I've touched on. So as of today, in fact, as way back as 2021, this hasn't changed. Africa only manufactures about 1% of the vaccines that it uses. So 99% of the vaccines are obtained from off the continent, in short, imported. So this has been seen as a challenge, and to counter this, there is an agenda to make sure that by 2040, the continent is able to manufacture at least 60%, with the intermediate goal of 30% by the year 2030. This is also highlighted in the new public health order, which has been adopted by the African Union. Next slide. Here we are just showing what we expect to see over the years. There's going to be an increase in demand for vaccines as we go on. So we are estimating a 5% increase per annum all the way up to 2040 for vaccine demand. And we expect then to see that for us to meet this, we would need to significantly increase the production capacity of vaccines on the continent. Next slide. So based on the need to promote vaccine manufacturing, PAVM was created in 2021. So in itself, it has got 8 board programs, which are seen as enablers of the vaccine manufacturing ecosystem. So all these programs are supposed to be happening at the same time in a coordinated manner. So you have the market design and demand intelligence. There we are focusing more on Africa vaccine procurement pooling mechanism to assure the manufacturers that if they increase their capacity to manufacture vaccines, they will have a guaranteed market. Then we have the access to finance, where we are trying to broker deals between financing institutions and the vaccine manufacturers so that they have sustainable financing for them to increase on the capacity. Then we have the technology transfer and intellectual property. Here with the realization that the vaccine manufacturing on the continent will require assistance from well-developed manufacturers in the world. So there will be need to transfer the technology from different parts of the world for them to assist those based on the continent. And then there's an aspect of regulatory strengthening. Medicine and vaccine regulation are key to make sure that what is manufactured and given to our people is of acceptable quality and safety. And then there is R&D, research and development, to make sure that we have research going on and developing new vaccines to attend to emerging needs. Then talent is where we talk about the workforce needs for vaccine manufacturing and many other programs that are within this, the ecosystem. Then the infrastructure development, here we talk about both the soft infrastructure, where we deal with the trade policies, such as the Africa Continental Free Trade Area. And then we also have to talk about the hard infrastructure itself, such as the transport systems that need to be in place for this industry to thrive. Next. Next, please. So as indicated earlier, we see that for both vaccine manufacturing and R&D, we have a very limited number of workforce. And so we see that for us to achieve the target that we have set, there is need to significantly increase the numbers for this workforce. So here we are just showing the statistics that you can find for the full-time employees for vaccine manufacturing, ranging from 900 to 15, and also for R&D, which is research and development in different settings of R&D, preclinical, clinical, and in biotech companies, the percentage ranging from 46 to 52%. Next. Again, this is just another illustration of what we need to do. So we see that for vaccine manufacturing, we are moving from about 1,600 to somewhere 8,800. And then for R&D, we need to move from 1,200 all the way to 5,000. And then in biotechs, we need to move from about 125 to 500. So I think all these numbers, what we are trying to indicate here is that these are coming from surveys that have been conducted to ascertain what the needs are for the continent to support vaccine manufacturing. So in developing the desired workforce, first of all, you must have an understanding of what you have. And then secondly, you need then to make projections and understand what you need using the desired timeframes that you'll be looking at. And this is the picture that we are trying to paint as far as vaccine manufacturing on the continent is concerned. Next. So what will it take to deliver on this talent development? Because we see that to get to about 14,000 from 3,000 is a huge undertaking. So we need to make sure that we tackle three main challenges that the continent faces. First of all, the scarcity of local talent development initiatives. By this, we see that there aren't sufficient number of degree programs, whilst most parts of the continent do offer pharmacy training, chemistry, and so on, particularly to do with the health-related programs. Most of the programs have been seen to be focusing a lot more on clinical training. And this, although might be useful in vaccine development at clinical stages, might not be enough to support pharmaceutical and vaccine manufacturing industry. So we need to increase the number of these training initiatives. The second challenge is the brain drain of the local talent. We see very often that the highly educated people who can work in this industry very often end up relocating to go to other countries where they find well-paid posts. So we need to increase the number of well-paid positions on the continent in order for us to keep those who are well-trained. And then sustainable financing models. Very often we see that institutions interested in offering these sort of programs do not have sustainable financing to support development of laboratories and scholarships for personnel interested in taking these programs. So we need to find sustainable financing models that can be used for us to develop the talent. Next. So we have adopted these thematic areas for us to develop the talent for vaccine manufacturing. as indicated, to attend to insufficient number of programs, we are adopting a model that supports introduction of more educational programs. So this will have to take care of both the short term, the mid-term, and the long term. So as Africa CDC, we looked at short term as in what do the vaccine manufacturers need right now, and identified different institutions of the continent. And very often in the recent past, you have been seeing call for applications for those who are interested to participate in these trainings to cater for short-term needs. In the midterm, we want to see collaborations between local institutions and off-continent institutions to develop programs that can attend to the needs. And in the long term, we want to have these programs fully offered on the continent. Number two is the internship for students or new graduates. There's usually a disconnect between the industry and the universities. So we are trying to bridge that gap by introducing internship programs which can allow that smooth transition. And that's one thing you should be on the lookout for. Then on the job development opportunities, the bigger vaccine manufacturing companies need to use their expertise and develop training programs for their workforce, but also for new workforce that are coming on to boost the numbers. Next. So these are some of the institutions that are offering short courses on the continent. So there are a limited number of them, and this is also when you zoom into these same institutions, you will notice that some of these do not, if not most of them, do not have the full capacity to provide the training, especially when it comes to hands-on trainings. And this is why we have seen that most of the time we are sending our trainees off the continent. Next. So these are some of the programs that are coming up. Fortunately, we have been seeing that there is this proactivity now, or could call it reactivity. So institutions are responding to the needs to have pharmaceutical and vaccine manufacturing talent developed. So a number of institutions have come on board. So we have, for example, this Regional Center of Excellence in East Africa that offers training in supply chain, pharmaceutical analysis, and then more programs coming in, for example, regulatory affairs and vaccinology. And then University of Rwanda introduced MSc Biotechnology with the support of the European Union. And then you have the University of Western Cape that's offering pharmacy administration in South Africa. And then you have University of Nairobi that offers MSc Infectious Diseases and MSc Vaccinology by Bits Alive from Bits University. Next slide. Okay, next slide. Yeah, let's go to next slide. So what we have seen also is that a number of institutions do offer these short courses, which you can also see, and in collaboration with off the continent institutions. But what's to note is that why this is important is the fact that sending trainees off the continent is very expensive. For example, in 2022, Africa CDC spent over $500,000 to train 53 trainees from vaccine manufacturers and regulatory authorities. And it is anticipated that they will spend similar amounts on the same number of employees. So if you look at a continent that is resource limited, that is not sustainable. So this is why we are having a look at those institutions which are locally based, which are trying to localize these trainings and give them support to do so. So some of them are listed here. You have IPD in Senegal, you have CSIR in South Africa, and you have Bloom in Nigeria, and Kina Foundation, that's in Ghana, also working on these initiatives. Next. As far as responding to internships, we see that a number of companies on the continent are offering internship programs, but there's still a large number of companies that are still not open to this initiative. And so we'll see that later in the year and early next year, Africa CDC will be introducing a structured internship program in collaboration with companies and a number of funders who are interested to support this initiative. Next. So as Africa CDC, what we think is that we need to support or adopt a collaborative approach in developing talent. So we have adopted what we call a regional capability and capacity network approach. So this brings together educational institutions in form of trade schools and universities and research institutions and manufacturers together to develop training programs in different regions of Africa. So it is anticipated that we will have about 5 RCCAs on the continent based on the geographical demarcations of the continent. So next, let's see what we anticipate these RCCAs will do. Next, please. So we anticipate that first of all, we'll make a call for proposals to operationalize this, and we'll employ a certain criteria. Basically, we want whatever institution will be acting as a hub of training, biopharmaceutical training in different regions, should be able to have state-of-the-art training facilities, expertise for that, and the ability to train in multiple languages as among some of the criteria that we are going to use. Next. So to address this talent development needs, we have embarked on a number of issues. One of them is to create the RCCNs. And through the RCCNs, we intend to support these institutions through funding for them to introduce short course trainings, which are some of them being offered off the continent. And then in the medium term, these short courses will be localized. And then in the long term, we will have these completely localized on the continent. Obviously, at the center of this is collaborations between the R&D institutions, the training institutions, the manufacturing institutions, and regulatory institutions as well. Next. So some of the initiatives that the RCCNs will be conducting, what we hope to see is that they will be conducting needs assessment in different regions of the continent before developing their training programs. So to assist them conduct the needs assessment, Africa CDC has developed competence frameworks for both vaccine manufacturing and R&D institutions, with NEXT being the regulatory affairs competence framework that will be coming on. So this is being done for us to define what sort of skills you actually need for these vaccine manufacturing institutions. Next. So as indicated, we've developed the competence framework, and after developing the competence framework, we've gone on to develop training needs assessment. And at the moment, we are onboarding manufacturers for them to tell us what their training needs are. And then that's going to lead to the development of foundational and specialized training curricula. So what this is trying to say is that, first of all, you must define the skills that you need in pharmaceutical manufacturing setting or vaccine manufacturing setting. And then based on that, you can then define what the training needs are. And these training needs is what should then inform what sort of training programs should be introduced in a particular country or region. So this is the approach that we have taken as Africa. Next. The next slide really is just to indicate the approach that we are taking to develop the competence framework. So this competence framework was developed by looking at different profiles via LinkedIn and other websites that advertise different jobs for vaccine manufacturing. And based on that, we have gone on to define 110 roles unique roles that can exist in the vaccine manufacturing industry. So this template that has been developed and will be exposed to validation and adoption in August in Egypt is going to act as a template for carrying out ongoing training needs and capability assessments. And it will be a tool to inform curricular development and subsequent updates, and will be a tool for training providers to map their course offerings. So they can have a look at this and see what needs to be developed and offered to that particular country. Next. Thank you. That was my last slide.
Excellent. Dr. Moila, that was extremely insightful, extremely valuable. Quick question. What caught my attention was the competency framework. By the way, can you hear me and see me?
Yes, Prof.
Yes, yes.
Yeah. So just want to check the competency framework that you mentioned. Is that, could you put the link of that competency framework on this chat for others to access as well? Is that public information?
So as indicated, the competence framework has undergone expert peer review, and now will be undergoing validation at a workshop to be held from 29th to 31st August in Egypt. And perhaps the only thing we can indicate is that those interested can contact me. We can send an invite. After that, it will then be published on the Africa CDC website for public consumption.
Wonderful, wonderful. We might even hold a session for this, so beyond Ethiopia, for the global audience as well. Once this is ready, I think it's extremely useful. All right, so with that, thank you so much again. Do we have the next speaker? I know he was having some technology issues. Sonia, is he back?
Yes, Prof, he's there. Mr.
All
Messi.
right, Professor Messe Woldemariam, are you there? Can we hear you?
Hi, Prof. I am there. Yeah, I have some issues, but now it's solved.
You're most welcome. Can you lower the camera a little bit so we see more of you? Perfect. Thank you. So let me introduce Professor Messe Woldemariam. He has been working as an academician in public and private university, teaching various courses in pharmacy for the last 10 years. Extensive teaching experience in pharmacognosy, natural products, and traditional medicine. That's wonderful. Leading the pharmaceutical manufacturing industry development sector within the Ethiopian Food, Beverage, and Pharmaceutical Industry Institute, and as a Deputy Director General for the last 8 years. And he's currently leading the pharmaceutical manufacturing development sector as a director to the AHRI. The topic is extremely valuable. Your experience is exactly what we need. So we look forward to hearing from you. And you have 15 minutes, Prof. Over.
Hi, everyone. I would like to say good morning, good afternoon, and good evening from across different time zones. I do appreciate for the introduction, Professor Paul, and I do also thank organizers of this very important webinar and inviting me to speak about the overview of pharmaceutical manufacturing workforce in Ethiopia. So I would like also to say thank you to Empower, Ethiopian Pharmaceutical Association, African CDC, and the African Union. Having said, in the time I have given, I will be briefly go to the pharmaceutical manufacturing workforce in Ethiopia. Please next. So my outline in the presentation will be, I will give you brief background about who we are and what we are doing, and about our institute, which Dr. Chiluba, I think, mentioned in his one of the slide I saw, part of the internal training given by different organizations. Our institute is Armor Hansen Research Institute, AHRI, in brief. And then we will see the industry overview briefly. And then what were the initiatives, incentives, and activities done so far in promoting pharmaceutical manufacturing workforce. And of course, the challenge that we faced and the way forward. Next, please. This structure looks a bit busy, but previously the pharmaceutical manufacturing industry development was under Ministry of Trade and Industry. As you can see, there is a manufacturing sector in the left, and the regulatory sector at the right, and the bottom you can see the trade promotion sector within the joint ministry. As you can see in the left corner, the government, Ethiopian government, prioritized strategic economic sectors and hence established institutes which provide all-round support to these strategic commodities. So we were in the Ethiopian Food, Beverage, and Pharmaceutical Industry Development Institute. Next, please. So the institute was established, actually the older institute, that's the Food, Beverage, and Pharmaceutical Industry Development Institute, which was established in 2013 with the objectives to provide overall support to food, beverage, and pharmaceutical industries in order to accelerate technology transfer and enable the work environment for the industry to be competitive with the missions and visions as indicated in the slide shared. Next, please. So I just want to give the background of the institute because currently the government made some organization restructure. So now the pharmaceutical manufacturing industry development is shifted to the Ministry of Health, which I mentioned it before in the Ministry of Industry, and under Armor Hansen Research Institute, because the food and beverage parts separated and the pharmaceutical now is under the Ministry of Health in order to give more emphasis to the sector. Just to talk a bit about our institute, the newer one, that's Armor Hansen Research Institute. Actually, this institute was established about 53 years before with the support from Norwegian and Swedish government. During that time, leprosy was really an issue still there, focusing on leprosy immunology, biomedical and clinical research, and others. So it started in 1970, and it made some evolution, and currently we call it is a new AHRI because it encompasses the pharmaceutical manufacturing sector. That is the transition from the Food, Beverage, and Pharmaceutical Industry Development Institute. Next, please. So Armor Hansen Research Institute, it is named or coined after the late scientist, Norwegian physician actually, who is remembered for his identification of the bacteria, Mycobacterium leprae, in 1873. That was a causative agent of leprosy. So that's why the name, it is just to remember this renowned scientist. Actually, our institute is reestablished, as I've said before, with the emphasis of the pharmaceutical manufacturing sector, with 6 objectives, as it is indicated. But I just want to make emphasis of these objectives for the purpose of this presentation. It is to promote and strengthen local production of medicines, vaccines, diagnostics, therapeutics, and also build national human capacity and resources in the biomedical research, and also to promote and foster the pharmaceutical manufacturing development sector in Ethiopia. Next, please. So the institute is given about 31 different activities. Of this, I shared some of the activities, mainly 3 of them, which is mandated to promote health innovations and undertake biomedical research, focusing on vaccine, diagnostics, therapeutics, of course, traditional medicine, and pharma products. And for the purpose of this presentation, especially on number 3, as you can see, the Institute is also mandated to cooperate with national and international universities and relevant institutions, as Dr. Juluba mentioned before, to advance the national capacity in human resource development on related products, and also, of course, for the manufacturing activity. By the way, I just want to also mention that we are also working together with different associations, including the professional association like the Ethiopian Pharmaceutical Association, and the manufacturing sectoral associations like Ethiopian Pharmaceutical and Medical Supplies Manufacturing Association as well. Next, please. So this is a brief background about who we are and what we are doing. The next is just in the few slides, I'll share some of overview of the pharma market in Ethiopia. As you can see in the slide, the pharma market, which was used to be 2015 $450 million total, now is currently about $1 billion. There are 2 markets in Ethiopia: the private market and the public market. Actually, the one that is supplied through the government agency called the Ethiopian Pharmaceutical Supply Service, which covers 75% of the total pharma. Though the pharmaceutical manufacturing sector is nascent and, of course, growing rapidly in Ethiopia, is the coverage from this total market is between 20 and 25%. Next, please. As you can see in this slide, this gives some idea about the industry size. By the way, when we say pharmaceutical in our context, it broadly encompasses herbal products, veterinary and human medicine, healthcare and personal care products that are called cosmeceuticals, if you like. And with a total of 100 pharmaceutical manufacturers in these broad categories are currently working or operational in Ethiopia. And of course, 10 more companies are on pipeline with mixed products. And among these, about 4 pharmaceutical manufacturing companies are current good manufacturing practice certified by the Ethiopian Food and Drug Authority. Next, please. So coming to the pharmaceutical manufacturing workforce, as I have highlighted in my previous slide, there are currently about 100 different manufacturing companies in the 4 broad categories I've mentioned. And based on the data we have, there are more than about 12,000 employees or direct jobs created by these industries, and employees or professionals or personals from various disciplines like pharmacy, chemistry, biology, engineering disciplines, and of course, various disciplines from the admin staffs. And the workforce actually from the higher universities, the higher education training centers or colleges in the private, actually there are more than 27 universities, public universities of course, which provide undergraduate and postgraduate pharmacy degree and other related programs. And there are also a number of technical and vocational training college, the TVET, across the country in 12 regions. And sorry, next please. So embarking a bit on the education and the human resource, if I take you 30 years before, there were almost non-existent the private and public schools were offering education in the pharmacy and others. But since then, there is a tremendous rise in the number of schools, workforce, and other programs that was used to be 30 years before. Now there are more schools offering both undergraduate and postgraduate programs in the pharmacy. And of course, biomedical engineering programs are also now coming, and which are offered in 14 public institutions and 5 universities and 9 TVET colleges, which were established in 2007. And of course, MSc in biomedical engineering programs are also started in universities, and of course, PhD in Addis Ababa University, which is one of the oldest universities in Ethiopia. Next, please. As you can see here, which I have mentioned before, like 30 years before, we had only one public school in pharmacy education and non-existent on biomedical engineering, and there were no in private schools. But currently, we have about 27 universities. Actually, we have totally more than 50 universities in the government, but out of this, more than half of the universities have pharmacy educations and other related programs for the workforce of the pharmaceutical manufacturing in Ethiopia. Next, please. So if you see the proportion of the professionals, or especially the pharmacists' density in 2003, which was less than 2 per 100,000 population, and in 2011, it's a bit increased, it's less than 3 per 100,000 population. Actually, the exact figure maybe is a bit difficult to say currently, but the trend is increasing. Next, please. So in order to improve the quality of the graduates from higher universities, currently there is introduction of national licensure examination for pharmacy. Of course, this year, all the universities are launching this for other programs too. And there is also provision of continuous professional development trainings for pharmacy professionals and others throughout the country. And also recently there is a move by the Education and Training Authority to accredit all higher education institutions. This is a government commitment to improve the quality of professionals and graduates from higher universities, of course, which are public universities. Next, please. So now coming to the pharmaceutical manufacturing workforce, what were the initiatives and incentives and activities? In the few slides, I'll try to embark on this. Next, please. As I've said before, though the pharmaceutical manufacturing industry development sector is as an asset, but the government has given attention and is committed to promote this sector in Ethiopia. And I think probably Ethiopia took the bold measure to prepare its own national strategy and plan of action for pharmaceutical manufacturing development in Ethiopia. As you can see in the picture, this was in 2015, this document launched with the presence of higher excellencies, ministers, and of course the former DG of WHO and the former president of AAU and the ministers and so on. Next, please. So as you can see here, in this national strategy, among the 10 strategic objectives, if you see, objective 4 deals with human resource development through relevant education and establishing centers of excellence, which I will mention later on. Please, next. And another initiative came from the pharmaceutical technology roadmap. There are also a number of strategic goals mentioned in this document. If you see the last strategic goals, it deals about producing adequate number of qualified human resource to support the pharmaceutical research and development in Ethiopia. That is also related to what Dr. Chiluba was mentioning in his presentation. Next, please. The third initiative, this is a very important document that we generated from benchmarking and studying the experiences of related countries who advanced in pharmaceutical industry, like from mostly from Asian countries. We came up with key policy recommendations. And with these key policy recommendations, there were some developments like building international standard pharmaceutical industry park in Ethiopia, which is a vicinity of the capital Addis. And as you can see in the second bullet, there is enabling business environment. That is, the human resource development is also given attention in these key policy recommendations. And even some incentives also treated in this key policy recommendation, in addition to attraction of foreign direct investment, industrial park development, and strengthening government institutions and export facilitations, of course, with major emphasis on import substitution. The government was committed to incentivize local pharmaceutical manufacturing in cost sharing for veteran experts or foreign experts who join the local pharmaceutical manufacturing, even with the cost sharing of the salaries and other benefit to the sector. Of course, in the value chain of the pharma industry, that means where this technical person join in the formulation or R&D or in the innovative products. Next, please.
Professor Waldemariam, we're out of time. Could I just ask you to conclude, if you can, please, now? Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you, Prof. Just almost finishing. These are just to indicate some of the activities we're doing, especially with the universities through university industry linkage, provide capacity development, conduct research and development, and provide long-term and short-term trainings, curriculum developments for the pharmaceutical manufacturing industry in Ethiopia, including GMP trainings and others. And I have some slides, can I show in just in a minute? Of course, these are additional trainings that we are providing for master's and PhD students with different universities. In the Armor Hansen Research Institute, as you can see, about 68 PhD students and 13 master's students in different biomedical areas. Next, please. So these are some of the challenges that we are facing in the development of the workforce in the Ethiopia, and some are associated with poor integration of theory and practice, language barriers, dealing with foreign-owned companies, of course, the production capacity of local manufacturers, and also poor technology acquisitions are some of the problems which I have highlighted. Just the last slide. These are some of the CGMP certified facilities in Ethiopia. Just the last slide. Yeah, so this is a way forward, which there are key stakeholders we have identified, like the Ethiopian Investment Commissions and the Ethiopian Pharmaceutical Supply Service and the Ethiopian Food and Drug Authority. If we work together with universities, research institutes, and technical vocational education trainings and other stakeholders and development partners, of course, the future is bright in terms of the fostering and development of the human resource development. Thank you very much. Sorry for taking a few minutes.
Professor Waldemarian, that's excellent, extremely useful. I apologize to rush you. The good thing is everyone will be receiving the slide deck and they can follow up with you. Please add your contact details on your PowerPoint so they can reach out to you. So we've heard about the continental approach, and that was vaccine focused. And now we just heard from Ethiopia, country focused, which was more pharma focused, pharmaceutical focused. I'd like us to now go to one of the regional mechanisms that will be presented by Ms. Akile Dube, who's an expert in the area of regulatory, GMP, and pharmaceutical manufacturing. I've worked closely with her on a WHO project. Sakile, the floor is yours, and may I ask you to be as efficient as you can so we can catch up a little bit of lost time. Thank you. Over.
Certainly. A warm welcome to all our participants. So as Paul has actually indicated, I'll just be sharing very briefly on an innovative strategy to accelerate approval of pharmaceutical products. Could I please ask that the presentation be projected? Thank you. You can move through. I'm not going to spend time on the outline, but basically to get an understanding of why we need to talk about these pathways. So pharmaceutical industry, as well as the regulators, have got a relationship that is kind of imposed on them. So it's important that people understand that with specialized products like pharmaceuticals, which need which have a very unique requirement for the workforce, one has to then be able to look at how the regulator and the regulatory space actually interacts with our professionals. So I'm just going to present, giving an example of what is happening in the SADC region, which is the southern part of Africa. Next slide, please. So some of you may or may not have heard about an initiative called Zazibona. So Zazibona is basically a harmonization initiative that applies to the 16 SADC member countries. So this was put together to address certain challenges like the workload and the timelines that were taking rather long for manufacturers to register products within the SADC region. It was also then set up to develop a mutual trust and confidence amongst the regulators so that at the end of the day, they can come up with a more efficient way of registering products. So in addition, of course, was to also train and build capacity within the regulatory space. So from as far back as October 2013, 4 countries got together within the region. So those were Zambia, Zimbabwe, Botswana, and Namibia. And that's where the name Zazibona derives itself from, the first 2 letters of each of the initial participating countries. After it got off and did quite well, it then became endorsed by the SADC Ministers of Health as a full initiative for the region. So currently now we have all SADC member states participating, but in different capacities. So you have 9 that we call active. When we say that they're active, we're essentially saying that they have the capacity to assess products, conduct GMP inspections. Then those that we call non-active are those that either don't even have a framework to register the products or else don't have the capacity to contribute to the process. However, they are keen to use the outputs for their own for their own process to make sure that the medicines circulating within their countries are actually safe and of good quality. Then, of course, a country that is not particularly has not made up its mind where it's sitting would then still be called an observer. And there on your screen, you will see how the different countries are actually participating. Next slide, please. So what you're seeing there is a presentation of the full mechanism of why it actually makes sense to have this collaborative initiative. So what happens with that is you have a common submission. So amongst 16 countries, you would have one application or a same application submitted to the member states. And of course, it's an essential medicines for all of them. And the manufacturer says, yes, you can actually collaborate, you can do the assessment together. And then the 16, or it's not always the 16, but at least the 9 active member states, then look at the application and come up with a consolidated list of queries. So instead of an applicant dealing with queries from country X, country Y, country Z, and all of them probably being very different, they now get a consolidated list and are able to attend quickly to that and respond. And then for the regulator, there's one primary assessment that has been done. And then out of that, you get a number of the consolidated reports. And so it's a win-win situation. If we move to the next slide, please. So this basically just highlights what the process itself actually entails. In other words, an application is received. Once it's been received, then the receiving country screens it, just checks that it meets and checks all the boxes. And then once it's actually screened and deemed to be fine, then the process assigns a rapporteur. So that rapporteur is the one that will do the full assessment of the product. And having done that full assessment, they then come up with the list of queries, which are then discussed at what we would call the joint assessment session. Then everybody sits around the table and says, yes, we collaborate and we agree with what you have raised as the first reviewer. And now we can actually say, this is the consolidated list of queries, and it then gets sent out. The applicant gets to respond, and there's a second review of those queries. And thereafter, you then get a proposed position, and the final decision is then made in a third sitting. And this process roughly takes about anything between 6 to 9 months, which is also accounting for the time between back and forth with the regulator. And therefore, you have tackled as a manufacturer all the countries at once instead of having to deal with each and every one of them individually. So that is the essence of the collaboration. Next slide, please. In the next slide, we're then saying to ourselves, has this actually worked? How well has this worked? Well, since inception, which was in October of 2013, we've had 42 of these joint assessment sessions where the regional assessors come together and deliberate over the applications presented. 390 products have been considered, and 61 manufacturing facilities have actually been inspected through this joint collaborative process. Then, even prior to COVID, there was an opening of an alternative pathway for GMP approval, which is the desk review. So this then says that if you have been inspected by a very stringent regulatory authority, there's no need for another swarm of regulators coming through and inspecting you yet again. If you share the inspection report from a stringent regulatory authority like UK MHRA, then the region will actually do reliance on that. And then in COVID, again, there was adaptation, which allowed remote inspections to actually be initiated. In the process, we've also had a lot of capacity being built because some countries, even though they had the legislation to register products, they really didn't know how to go about it. So through this interaction, you now have a pool of at least 40 assessors within the region that now also have equal competency because of the interaction with each other. And we also undertake regular training at both an elementary, so that would be the base level, and we keep on building with those that already have knowledge so that we are keeping up with industry norms as well as regulatory best practices. And then I think earlier on it was Dr. Chiluba who's mentioned about competency. So similarly, the regulators also need to have a competency framework, and at the moment we are riding on the WHO competency framework. And so these are some of our key successes, which of course also includes where we were able to transition to a virtual environment. The next slide. Then in terms of timelines, we basically are looking at a commitment of 9 months. This is what the initiative promises industry. Currently, we are at about 12 months, mainly because of a few bottlenecks, but also because of the number of countries that have increased in terms of participation. So it was easier when you only had the 4 countries and not so many applications coming through. But now we're ranging we're about 12 months, but we also have successes as good as 3 months. Then in terms of after the recommendation to finalizing the product, this is the commitment is 3 months, but we're ranging between 1 to 7 months. And then what we're now looking at is how we can actually improve the process so that we can still meet the commitments that were made. And I think moving on to my final slide. What are we going to do in the future? We're really focusing now. So we've had almost 10 years of this initiative. It works quite well, but as you can see that from the commitment of 9 months, if we're now sitting at 12 months, we've increased by the 3 months, and that's not something that we're too happy about. So we're looking at process improvement, and this will happen through some kind of centralization. We're also wanting to look at medical products. We learned quite a lot when COVID came along that there was just basically nothing for diagnosis. It's very easy to talk about the curatives, but not the diagnostic side. And then, of course, we will actually want to have more visibility out there. And I think that probably ends my presentation. Thank you very much.
Excellent. Sakile, that was extremely useful. And let me just connect the dots. We heard both from the first 2 speakers the importance of the role of regulatory. And in the pharmaceutical industry, without regulatory, you cannot have products reaching the market. Hence, the role of regulatory agencies working effectively, hand in hand, efficiently, while still protecting the citizens is absolutely vital. And here we have a mechanism which is catalyzed by WHO working at the regional level to help bring efficiencies. Interestingly, I worked on the similar project with WHO across ASEAN countries in Asia, which included 10 countries. And there are several other mechanisms that are being spearheaded by WHO working with the regulatory agencies. Thank you so much, Sakile. Let's move on to the next one. Okay. Great. Just switch the spotlight. So strengthening pharmaceutical manufacturing workforce capacity in Ethiopia and Africa and showcasing global innovations. So let me just continue from that. Hang on one second. I will be rather quick and I will skip a few slides. This one just summarizes the fact that Empower School of Health, we're based out of Geneva, based out of Geneva. Our focus is on capacity building. And we work across multiple countries, multiple regions, but the whole focus, our entire focus, how do we bring scalable capacity building across the world in the area of global public health. Next. Here are some of our key people who are advising us, from former head of state of Ghana, President Kufuor himself, he's an incredible human being, to Michelle Sidibe, who is the special envoy for the African Medicines Agency, UN director, former ministers of health, etc. Next. The various organizations that we partner with, work with, and support in capacity building: government, academia, UN agencies, international NGOs. Next. So when we talk about building capacities, next slide, and the pharmaceutical workforce. So we have a partnership with IPD, this is the Institute Pasteur in Dakar, and we heard about that already. You can move to the next slide. And at the same time, we're in the process of finalizing an MOU with Africa CDC. We have a partnership with the Ethiopian Pharmacy Agency, EPA, and we are working closely with the government of India to bring capacity across various countries. So this summary has been very nicely already provided to you by our Africa CDC colleague about the gaps, the challenges, the needs, and the goals that they have in place over 2030 and 2040. And in this particular situation, what we're looking for is, well, how do we achieve that? And you'll see the various partners that they've already mentioned. Next slide. So how can we support the goals of the African Union, of the African continent, in achieving their targets? So pharmaceutical manufacturing requires highly skilled teams and various skill sets. So we often think, when we talk about pharmaceutical manufacturing, we actually often think of pharmacists, but that's actually not accurate. Pharmacists indeed are a critical element and component of manufacturing. I'm a pharmacist, but in addition to them, look at the kind of skill sets that you need, and many of them aren't pharmacy oriented. They are indeed from other sources. We heard the various speakers talk about microbiology, regulatory, clinical chemistry, tech transfer, investments, finance, security, IT, etc. So it's a very vast and diverse set of skills that are needed. So the 10,000 people that are needed just in vaccines would come from different areas. However, when we talk about pharma and vaccines, it's closer to 30 to 40,000 over the next 10 to 15 years. So it's a very large number of specialized people that are needed. Over, next. So if we categorize the different functions that are needed into three buckets: operations, regulatory, and support. Look at the operations side, all the different components. I won't read it out, but you can sort of scan through it. Regulatory, multiple different skill sets that are needed: dossier management, GMP, pharmacovigilance, GLP, etc., etc. Support side, procurement, supply chain, and a bunch of others, IT, security. You heard from our Ethiopian colleague about their intent and their partnership with EPSS, the National Supply Chain Organization. So you have to bring all of them together. Next. Okay, just click through one by one. So what are the different kinds of effective learning methodologies that we can bring? There's one more click, go ahead, there you go. And with this, and was also mentioned that, you know, $500,000 were invested for 53 people for training, but that is not sustainable. That's almost $10,000 per person of training last year that Africa CDC put in, but many of them would move on after a while. So it's a bit of a challenge from that point of view. How can we bring in different styles, methods, and approaches of training and learning without it being too expensive, there being continuous learning? So option one, digital learning, collaborative learning, online learning, without you having to leave your jobs, without you having to go too far, where you have access to global experts who are patched in, where you have global knowledge, latest knowledge of whatever is being done. And you can do both asynchronous or synchronous learning, which means you learn at your own time or you join webinars like these. Customized on-site intensive training at the location. You're working at a particular manufacturing facility and they would like to upgrade their skill sets in microbiology and quality control, whatever it might be, you get on-site training. Live webinars and global expert sessions is another one, something similar to this. And the fourth one, which is also really valuable and exciting, is workforce exchange programs, field visits, and roadshows. India, for example, next slide, please. India, as you may know, is referred to as the pharmaceutical factory to the world. Next slide, please. You've got China being the factory to the world, but when it comes to pharmaceuticals, India indeed is one of the global leaders. And about 30% of all, 30, maybe even 40% of pharmaceutical products on the African continent are coming from India. Vaccines, India provides 50 to 60% of global vaccines, of course, including COVID and a bunch of others. So India has the capability and the capacity to bring high quality, low cost products at scale to the market. And so, well, how do they do it? How can we learn from them? And so one of the trips that we've organized, which will be in September 25th to 28th, and if you are interested, most welcome to, and we'll share some more details with you, please reach out to the info email ID, which we'll be sharing with you later on. Next. We're also developing all the content that would be available online. There'll be plenty of free content and courses and learning, and of course, some paid ones as well. We are not rebuilding these learning platforms. We are plugging in and connecting with our various partners where the content is ready-made and can be learned and picked up. Next slide. There's just a few slides to show some topics on the education side. Biopharmaceutical manufacturing processes or oral solid dosage forms, water generation, and things like that. The last one talks about the Master of Science in Supply Chain, and I'll talk about that in a minute. Next slide. That's okay. We talked about that. Next. Next. So when we talk about some of the online courses that you can enroll in. Next. So there's a Master's in Supply Chain that we offer along with the United Nations Institute of Training and Research. It's co-certified with them. This is a 24-month and a 12-month master's degree. Next, it's all online. Next. And we'll share these details with you, so please reach out to us. I don't want to take too much of your time, and I want to leave the floor open. So lots of short courses if you want to do a 2-month course, a free course, or a 2-year course. All these options are there. Next. And there are scholarship programs available for different courses. Next. Next slide. So just before we go on to, I see some messages coming through regarding certifications and everything else. Just go back. We'll do a poll first. We'll go to the poll. Yeah. So this will take you 2 minutes to do the poll. We'll then go to the Q&A because you still have 5 minutes to reach out to the incredible speakers that are present here. So, and I see some questions have already come through. Please save your questions that would be addressed, and please mention the speaker with whom, to whom you are addressing the question. Feel free to type in the question as well. That would save time as well. It'll give the speaker a moment to think. Okay. We have almost 200 people, which is great. And there's going to be a series of these webinars in partnership with Africa CDC, NIPAD, WAHO, WHO, and various other organizations across Africa, Europe, United States, and across Asia as well. So do stay tuned if this is an area of interest for you. Okay. We've already, once we have about 50% answered, I'll start to pre-share some information. So everyone thought this was useful. So we're speakers, thank you so much. We're hitting the right topic for the audience. Which courses are people interested in? The industrial tour, about 15%, pharmaceutical manufacturing, 20%, pharmaceutical management, about 20%, vaccine manufacturing, about 13%, pharmaceutical marketing, 5%, 6%, waste management, 3%, global health, 10%, and health leadership, about 11%. So extremely useful to know what you're interested in and where we focus, which style of learning, short versus long, industrial tour, there's a whole range. Short courses that people are looking more for the short course for the moment, the online 2-month, which is a great way to start, and then you can go deeper. And actually a lot of people interested in a 2-year online master's as well, which is with the UN. So 62% have replied. You can just share it with the audience. Okay, can everybody see the results? Sonia, can you see? I'm just scrolling the results, but can everybody see it?
Yes, Prof.
Okay, so as we mentioned, everyone found it useful, and these were the areas of interest. Okay, wonderful. I'm gonna stop sharing, and you can stop the PowerPoint, and please have the speakers ready. Speakers, if you could share your videos so that everybody has access to you, and then they can ask a few questions. Let me make sure that I can actually see the questions coming through chat. So Sonia, if you could reach out, let me see, okay. Do we have any hands up, or has somebody written a question? Soft copy of the presentations, yes, you will get that. Oh, dear ones, this is Alex from Rwanda. 1% of vaccines manufactured. Want to ask what percentage of other health products? Okay. So if it's 1% of vaccines that are manufactured in Africa, what about pharmaceutical products? Does somebody have an approximate number for them? One of the speakers? The number that I have read is somewhere. Chiluba, are you going to speak?
Yeah, I wanted to speak to it. I think with pharmaceutical, the other medicines, the number still is very low. It goes below 10%. I think in another study that we were doing, we were talking of less than 5% manufactured on the continent. And that's also skewed if you have a look at the distribution where that is done. Over 60% of that small percentage is done in North Africa. And then there's South Africa and Nigeria coming in. So even with just pharmaceuticals, the percentage is alarmingly low. So that's why you see that the PAVM agenda has also been expanded now to not just focus on vaccines, but to also be looking at medical devices and therapeutics to attend to that agenda as well.
Yeah, let me add to that. So there's about 800 to 900 pharmaceutical manufacturing facilities across Africa. This seems like a lot, but most of them are in 5 or 6 countries, okay? And to just compare, in India, there's about close to 10,000. China has 4,000. Which gives you a sense of how many, and remember, that's per country, and we're talking about a continent over here, okay? But the number indeed I've read is anywhere from 10 to 15% is locally manufactured. It's still very low, and we have a long way to go, okay? One more question I'm going to read here. How much financial investment will be required, and how much will African countries afford to invest prior to foreign aid? The question is requires a lot of clarification, so I'm not going to have people respond to that for the moment. It is a very good question, but there are so many layers to that question, it would be very difficult to answer in brief. Could I just leave the floor open for closing remarks in the order in which you all spoke? We're exactly on time, and then Sonia will answer the question, how do we get our certificates for attendance? She's going to explain that, okay? So Chiluba, Mese, and Sakile, the floor is yours for some poignant closing remarks. Thank you.
Thank you, Prof. It's going to be a short one from me, just to thank everyone who joined in today, and just to emphasize that the agenda is very big, and for every one of us here to participate and see how we can make a difference. Most of us might be working in different training institutions or pharmaceutical institutions. We emphasize from Africa CDC point of view that collaborations between training institutions, the industry, regulatory institutions, and other key stakeholders is key for us to have a coordinated approach to developing human resource and the industry. So we do hope that this approach can be adopted, and they will keep on engaging as we go on. And please feel free to contact us at Africa CDC for any ideas on how well we can do this. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Mwela. Messi. You're on mute. You're on mute.
Okay, now can you hear me?
Yes, please go ahead.
Great. So thank you very much, Professor Paul, arranging this through Empower and Ethiopian Pharmaceutical Association, giving us a chance to speak and showcase the Ethiopian pharmaceutical manufacturing sector in the workforce, of course. And I also thank all the participants participating in the poll, and also for their time. And also I do thank all the speakers and Sonia, of course. I think we need to collaborate each other. I hope Empower will also work with us. And we take also the advantage that Africa CDC is here in our capital, Addis. I hope Dr. Chuluba also work with us because, you know, the vaccine issue is coming. Ethiopia is also working hard on that. It is a flagship for our Minister of Health. So we need to strengthen the workforce in Ethiopia as well as the continent. So we are working towards that. Thank you very much, Kay.
Thank you, Professor Waldemariam. And as you know, we are one of your sponsors in the upcoming physical conference that EPA has on, I think, the 27th of July. So I recommend all the Ethiopians who are in the country to attend. Thank you. Sakile.
Thank you, Prof.
Thank you. So if one is looking at entering the production in terms of pharmaceuticals, etc., probably one of the things that becomes daunting is the amount of the level of regulation, and that probably concerns a lot of people. But then what the regulators are also saying, and this is what the message was also about the harmonization, is that in as much as manufacturers are committed to quality, the regulators are also committed to supporting industry. So it's now a coming together of minds, because the key thing that we're all concerned about is the supply chain and making sure that what we supply is of good quality. So there's a lot of convergence now. So coming from a background where you're contemplating or you're already within the manufacturing space, the key message that regulators would want you to hear over and over again is that it's no longer about catching someone out, but it is about making sure that there is adequate capacity support for the regulatory requirements. So, and we're always open to hearing more about how we can actually assist the industry. So thank you very much for this opportunity, and every opportunity we get to engage across the divide with the stakeholders, we always take, so that people get a better understanding of our goals, our objectives. It's not to catch people out and, you know, showcase that, oh, bad manufacturer. Yeah, thank you.
That's Sakile, thank you for highlighting that. It's a very different point of view from what it used to be. It is, and in your leading slide, you talked about hand in hand, regulators and manufacturers working together. And that is extremely important, while at the same time keeping a safe distance to avoid conflict of interest. So it's a combination of both. Thank you so much. So from my side, I would like to thank all the speakers, thank all the attendees who have been here. The journey ahead, as you've heard from Africa CDC, till 2040, that's the African Union plan, what the goal is. We're still young, I'm still young. So, you know, 2040 is just round the corner for me. I've got another 17 years of good sprint ahead. I don't mean a marathon. I'm going to sprint for the next 17 years to help you realize your goal. By the way, I've spent more than 10 years. I grew up in Nigeria, so I'm half African myself. So, and I'll be there any moment that I get. So thank you, everybody. Thank you, the organizers, for putting this together, and thank you to the speakers. All the best. Take care.
Thank you.
Bye.